Welcome back to Standing Apart, the show about how businesses and the people who lead them find their edge, hold it, and build something worth talking about. I'm Nigel Ridpath, and whether you're a regular listener or you've stumbled across us for the first time, I'm glad you're here. Every now and then, an episode comes along that surprises me. Not because the guest is famous or because the topic is fashionable, but because the conversation goes somewhere I genuinely didn't expect. This is one of those episodes. My guest today has spent 45 years in an industry most people would rather not think about at all. He built his own company from a standing start in the middle of a financial crash in a market he understood better than almost anyone. And in doing so, he managed to turn what most of us would call a disadvantage into something close to a superpower. We're going to talk about differentiation, about the kind of work that can't be automated away, and about what it actually looks like to build a culture, not from a whiteboard, but from the ground up. There's also a book with a title that will either make you laugh or make you flinch, possibly both. Stay with me on that. Before I introduce my guest, I owe you a brief public health announcement. This episode contains references to pest control, actual pest control, insects, rodents, infestations, the full biological unpleasantness that entails. Tim's book is called Infested, which rather commits to the theme. At one point in our conversation, Tim tells a story that I can only describe as the most memorable client case I've heard in years. It involves a twist that I will not spoil here, but that will stay with you, possibly for longer than you'd like. If you are of a particularly delicate constitution, you have been warned. There is a reasonably graphic moment. It passes, and I can assure you that the business insights on the other side are well worth it. Now, with that out the way, why Tim? Because beneath the exterminator overalls is one of the sharpest operators I've spoken to in a long time. Tim Whitt spent 30 years rising through corporate leadership in the pest control industry before retiring, only to take 3 months off to decompress and then, as you do, start a company from scratch in rural Oklahoma, right into the teeth of the 2008 financial crisis. So he's just published Infested, End Workplace Drama, Stop Toxic Employees, Build a Thriving Small Business, and it's already an Amazon #1 bestseller. It's a book about people management dressed up as a pest control manual, which I hope you'll agree is a very unique concept. Here's Tim. Well, Tim, it's really nice to see you today, and thanks for coming on the Standing Apart podcast. If we can start, perhaps you can give us a little background to yourself and your business.
Thank you, Nigel. It's great to be with you today. So my story is, it's pretty unique. I don't think when you're 18 years old and you're starting to look in a work path that you think 45 years later you'd be doing the same thing, but that's kind of how it broke out for me. But I began in the pest control industry when I turned 18. I was living with my brother at the time, and he told me that, hey, it's time for you to find a job, young man. So I started. Back in the day, you actually looked for a job in the newspaper, believe it or not. And I actually found a job posting for the company that my brother worked at, which was in the pest control industry. So one of the things that he did tell me, though, that he didn't want me to apply where he worked. So I think it was a matter that he was afraid that I might cast some shadows for him. So, what do you do when your older brother tells you not to do something? You go do it, right? So
of course,
I went down and applied where he actually worked, and they recognized that I had the same last name, and they granted me permission to start there the following day. So that's kind of how my career path went. But what was unique with me starting with that large corporate pest control company. The day that I interviewed, there was a gentleman that was interviewing me. He had a plaque that was sitting on his desk, and it was pretty unique. It said, your survival is based upon my success. And I'll never forget that, So I knew that at that point in time that organization was definitely a pay to play to
Mm.
be there. I was blessed to be with that organization for well over 30 years and
Wow.
retired from there in 2009. So, truly a blessing to be able to start at ground level and be able to work my way up through that organization. So it was a great time.
So
So
go on, tell me about your first day on the job, on the
yeah,
job proper.
yeah, yeah. So day one, right? It's a matter of you get the tour of the building, and then it was basically I remember they had paged the one of the technicians that was in the nearby area, and he came and picked me up, and that company at that time was concerned about maybe the technicians having riders ride with them. So they literally
Okay.
would take out the passenger seat out of the van. So I actually was able to sit on a milk crate next to him
Right.
in the van, which if you can imagine sitting in a van and not being able to see out the windows as you went through the day. So, I really got to start at the lowest, I think the lowest point I could do. And we kind of went through the day and, he started explaining to me how to, properly wear gloves and goggles and,
Yeah.
and how to kind of protect yourself as you're using, chemicals and things like that. So it was kind of a very unique start to things, and then of course, as time evolved, technology evolves within any industry. It was very
Mm.
unique how our industry especially has evolved over time, and just even as today, how unique things are, even with AI coming into play. And it's just fascinating how all things have changed. I'm sure it's the same in a lot of industries, but just being able to stay in one industry as long as I have and just seeing it evolve, it's just been truly fascinating.
So you say you retired back in 2009, but you didn't start playing golf and hanging around at the country club.
Right.
You
Yeah.
you took another
Yeah.
path, right?
Yeah, I was at that time when I retired from that corporation. I was living in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and it was in the '09. And um, my wife and I was trying to figure out what would be the next steps in my life, and I always had a interest in heart to what could I do on my own, So I wanted to start my own business, and so my wife and we had a property in Oklahoma about, I don't know, 3 hours north of Dallas. And so my wife and I sold our property and we moved 3 hours north and basically started a pest control company in a unfamiliar area, boots on the ground, basically from scratch, So I guess if you're going to start something fresh, new, move away and try it,
Mm.
and it was it was the right decision for me for sure.
And what are those key things that you had learned at that corporate that kind of gave you the confidence to go and strike out on your own? I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you knew the business, you knew how to do the job, but as we all know, working for a corporate for 30 years and then starting on your own is yeah, it's not always the same thing.
Yeah, yes, for sure. I think the key with starting any business, and for me, 30 years, I guess I could have stepped out at any moment in time and done this, but for me, it was timing. With starting any business, it's is when is it the right time? I had some milestones in my mind, right? I wanted to make sure that my children were off in college, and certain milestones had to be met for me to think what would be next, but yeah, sure, I knew how to, you know, apply chemicals or how to fill out a contract or sell a service, but
Yeah.
it's the back end piece. How do you form a LLC, or how do you register a company with the state agencies? Those are the missing pieces. What about that great federal government, the IRS? how do you navigate those waters? So those were the challenges. And I think that really is the struggles that a lot of small businesses have. When they begin, is either they may know the trade or the occupation they're in, but it's the back piece sometimes that they struggle with. And I think that's where failures begin for a lot of
Mm,
folks.
mm,
So
mm.
yeah, so I struggled through those moments, right? Because there's really not a playbook, that you can go out. Yeah, there are probably a few videos you can watch, but
Mm.
having to piece it all together, there's not a step one, step two, step three, step four, and you just have to kind of struggle through that. But I sure learned a lot. That was for sure.
Yeah. And of course, you look at that timing. I mean, this was the biggest crash
Yeah,
worldwide,
yeah, yeah.
since
It was.
the
Yeah.
the um the problems 200 years earlier. I mean, it was a
Hmm.
really, really bad time. uh, I quite often hear that, actually setting up a business during that sort of a period actually has a lot of advantages. Well, so
Yeah,
how was that? How was that period for you?
yeah.
How
That's
did it pan out?
Yeah, that's a great point. What was unique for me is I retired in the fall of '09, and I took a 3 months off. I just took 3 month pause, and then I came back ready to go mentally. And I think that's important that
Mm,
that you have that mental time just to kind of decompress and get prepared for what's next, and build out a timeline of things that need to occur. And it took me probably 120 days to really get everything in place. But you're right. It was a very unique time going into 2010. Um, but what I found was unique was, I think, because of the financial hardships, people were more willing to listen to maybe a competitive advantage, maybe for pricing,
mm,
maybe a competitive price, or, hey, yeah, sure, I'll take a quote.
yep,
Where when sometimes when the economy is doing well and people have more funds to work with, eh, maybe price is
yeah,
not an option. Maybe they don't
yeah,
really
yeah,
care so much
yeah,
about that. So you got to work a little bit
yeah.
harder then to get that sell.
Yeah, I'm going to let my audience into a little trade secret. We've met because the PR for your book got in touch with me. Thought you'd be a great guest for me, and as often with the PRs, they give me a list of things that the guest is available to discuss. And the first one is why gross jobs provide the ultimate recession or AI armor. And yeah, that had me hooked, right?
Yeah,
And why I really
sure.
wanted this. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, let's get into the first of those two topics then. So why do gross jobs provide the ultimate recession armor?
Yeah. Yeah. What's unique about pest control is, of course, it's a matter of it's almost like search and discovery. You have to go in and first. There's so many elements when you're dealing with pest control. Is number one, um, you have to know the biology of the insect or whatever you're dealing with. Number two, you have to know the chemical requirements, what can be used. Number three is you have to understand the structure, where they may live or the makeup of the structure.
Mm,
And then you compound that with the person you're dealing with, because if you have bed bugs in a home, that person's going to be really emotionally upset.
mm,
The other factor is that if you're dealing with termites in a structure, now you're dealing with the equity being consumed by the termites. They're taking
yeah,
away from that structure, right?
yeah,
All right. Then you have environmental concerns. Can you apply these materials safely,
mm,
around the home or business? So, those five elements alone really make up a lot of things to consider. And the other thing too is, of course, can they afford it?
mm,
So that
yeah,
affordability, right? So all of that. So those are the things that you have to consider first. So how does an AI world fit into all of that? Of course, you can start throwing some checklists there, right? I mean, AI can help you with formulations of chemicals. It could probably help you identify what an insect may be. So there's some things that can help you with, but I don't know how well it would help you under a home if you're doing a treatment or an application or identifying, where they may be living in a crack or a crevice, or
mm,
crawling up in an attic and trying to recover a raccoon,
mm,
or whatever it
mm,
may be, right? So it truly does assist today in a lot of areas, but I think it will always be boots on the ground in this industry.
mm,
Someone coming out. I don't know. I don't know if the consumer will feel confident with anything AI or robotic applying a herbicide or pesticide
mm,
in
mm,
and around the home. Imagine that in a hospital, something like that.
mm, mm.
I don't know. I think it's going to always take that human touch, applying that in that kind of environment.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that makes sense, and I think it's a topic that's cropped up a lot on this podcast over the last year or two. What are those jobs that are going to be safe in the world that we're looking at? I have two daughters in their 20s, and luckily I think they've chosen jobs that are a little bit AI proof. But I know
Sure.
having conversations with all sorts of people with teenage kids and younger, I think thinking, well, where do you guide them? And an interview with the so-called godfather of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, recently, and he said,
Yeah.
listen, just be a plumber, right? So,
Yeah.
and I guess that's kind of the industry that you found
Yeah.
yourself in. It is one that is always going to be needed,
Right.
and people don't have in the nicest way. People don't really have a choice about sorting this problem out. Right, they just
Right.
need to go to
Right.
someone that they can trust, and someone who's
Correct.
going to get the job done
That's right.
at a reasonable price.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not a luxury item. It's something that people are going to have, and it's an interesting lens for people running a business to look through, I guess.
Yeah, it is. The pest control industry is very unique simply because it's when something invades a home, or even a business, it's the sanctity of that home, and people become very emotionally concerned. And you as an individual have to have a very good level of servanthood to want to help that person, right? So people we find that really work well in this industry are people that are like maybe first responders, people that come from the, like, maybe the veteran military, fire department. Those type of people really do well in this industry because they're used to helping people, you know
Yeah, yeah,
and they're very successful in this industry. So, that's really a key point here. The that if you can't imagine how many phone calls that I get when I've had people call and cry in the middle of the night
mm,
because they've found unfortunately a bed bug in their
mm,
bed,
mm,
and they just can't go back to sleep, and they can't go in their room, and here you go, it's just
hmm,
really troubling,
yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah. Um, when I was looking through your book, the thing that I got really fascinated by is that you start with a pest people bestiary.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so this is basically trying to compare the varmints that you go after in your
Right,
business with the kind of people that can disrupt your business from the inside.
right.
I mean, I always dread to ask when you first had that idea
Yeah,
or
there you go.
made that
Yeah,
linkage.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for the question. It began when I was in a corporate role. As I advanced through the organization and I got into more of a senior leadership role, you do get to deal with people at different levels and deal with all types of issues, and we can talk more about we can talk more about the deeper dive as why those issues are developed. But what I started seeing was there was really four areas that employees kind of fell into, and what we'll talk about for a minute is really the toxic side, the bad behaviored employee, right? And one of them, the four areas really first are employees that drain the life out of people and the organization. People they work with and the offices they work in. So that's one. Second, basically, are the ones that just take and don't ever give anything back.
Yeah.
And I think we've all worked with them.
Yeah.
Or those that basically destroy the peace and undermine the infrastructure of the workplace, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
got those. And those that really are, they just basically attack the heart of the organization. They just go right after it. They don't care. They just go after it, right? So I
Yeah.
dealt with those people and that mindset and that behavior on a regular basis. Then after I was dealing with that behavior, I thought, man, that just kind of reminds me of what I'm out there dealing with, right? So if we hit reset for just a minute, as mentioned to you, draining the life out of people on the organization, draining the life out, it kind of reminds me of, like a bloodsucker,
Mm.
which is like, a bed bug or a flea or a tick or a mosquito, right? So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
there's where that metaphorical tie starts to begin, and then draining, taking from the company without giving back. It's like roaches. Roaches will take things, or rats will as
Mm.
well.
Mm.
The ones I really despise are raccoons. Raccoons are the craziest things because they'll look right at you and take things. I mean, they're just one of the most
We're
amazing.
very lucky that we don't have
Yeah,
those in
well,
the UK.
they're just craziest things on the planet. But the other one, like destroying peace and undermining the infrastructure. What would you think that one would mean, Nigel? Undermining the structure.
Oh, well, termites, I
There you
guess.
go, man. You're right on it. There you go. Exactly right. And then attacking the heart of the organization. It can be, like we think of bees, we think of wasps, yellow jackets, things like that. Um, they usually will only go after it sometimes when they're provoked.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think people are. I don't think people will do things out of despite. I think they will only do it when they're struck at or swiped at. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But then they'll
yeah,
lash out.
there
Yeah.
you go. Exactly
Yeah.
right. So that's how this began. And so when I was putting this book together, I thought about, how can I approach this toxic behavior in a way that could be a metaphorical, or a way that a reader or a small business owner could see it in a way other than a PowerPoint or a bullet point presentation or just some other way. So this
Yeah.
is more of a visual representation that a person could understand it in a better way.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the second part of the book is about the way you frame is about creating and maintaining a healthy ecosystem. So,
Yeah.
having described in very vivid terms
Yeah.
these things that can really hold an the kind of elements that can really hold an organization back, undermine it. You give your perspectives after, as you say, 45 years of business about
Right.
how to create that healthy ecosystem.
Yeah. The unique thing about an ecosystem is, and I think as businesses, or we don't understand that a large corporation can set its own ecosystem, right? But every office within that organization can do the same, because of the manager or the person running that operation. And then if you go one step further, uh, a person's own office within that building can be an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay. Or
Mm.
a cubicle could be someone's own ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And you need to understand that as a manager or a director, or you need to understand that and understand how you will fit into that, because it's very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last piece of this, the section to this book towards the end, was more of the things that I found that had success in my business. And what I wanted to do was to share a light on the things that I found that were the keys to my success. But I wanted to put them together for you as to um, just good enough information that would make sense, but not overwhelm you with too much detail.
Mm,
and that way I
yeah,
can give you more nuggets of gold than the buckets of gold. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much detail,
yeah, yeah,
but just make you think.
yeah, yeah. And where is the business at today? Are you still running it? You still involved, or have you handed it
Yeah,
over?
yeah. So what's really unique is, I started by myself, and we as the industry, as the business has grown, we have currently 19 employees at this point.
Mm,
Um, and we now are in a franchise model. So we're going to
okay.
be in 2026. We went into a franchise model, and I think why I feel good about that is that now we're in a position where my employees that are with me, even two, they could take this if they wanted to go into a
Mm,
franchisee and continue on as well. So I think it's unique is when you can take your ecosystem and go from looking at an employee, because it's very easy in this industry if you want to step away and start your own, because I've done that, right?
mm, mm,
Even my employee could go do that, right? And start his own.
mm.
So I've gone from looking at my employee as a potential competitor
Yeah,
to
yeah,
now looking at a potential partner in a franchisee type setting. So it's a very good feeling to be at that point.
yeah. And you've got some fairly unique viewpoints in terms of advertising, and why you shouldn't spend money on it. Tell me your views on that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think advertising has value depending on the way that you want to present it. I think a lot of times we don't maximize our current customer base.
Mm-mm.
You
Oh, for
know,
sure.
yeah, right. And I give you an example. It's unique that sometimes people don't understand in pest control. Your customer doesn't know what all you do in pest control. They don't know
Right.
the services you offer. So sometimes explaining that and doing a better job in your own business, what other things you do within your business
Yeah.
would be a start, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and whether that's creating a brochure or even having a person call your clients and your customers and say, hey, well, by the way, did you know we offer this or this or this or this? And just getting a nod or, oh, I didn't know you did that. Or, you always got to constantly have something in front of that client or a customer, letting them know what you do. When someone calls our office, we greet them and we say, thank you for calling Pied Piper Pest, Termite, and Lawn Service. We say those three things because
Right.
those are the three things that we
Yeah.
generate the most revenue for us, right?
Yeah.
So it's always in front of them. But one of the things that really help us well is we have a referral program, and the referral program is very simple. Is if I have a current customer that refers a potential new client to us, and it's a very simple transaction, we give the current customer a $35 referral fee and the new client gets a $35 referral fee. So they
Right.
both win, and there's no
Yeah.
maximum to that. There's no max
Yeah. Yeah.
cap to that. So, and it can just go on and on. And then what that we do is we will share that information to with them. Hey, thank you, Mrs. Jones, for referring Mrs. Smith, and it just kind of goes on like that. So that's one way. I think too in commercial, like in our commercial businesses, is just understanding what other locations are available. Sometimes you don't ask. What else do you
Yeah.
own?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So it's just sometimes it's just a matter of understanding your client, what they have, what else can be offered, and,
Yeah.
and going from there. Um, I'll share this with you that this is the most amazing thing that ever happened to me in business is um, understanding when I came from the corporate uh, uh, business that I was with, they solely did pest control and termite control. 3 years into my own business, owning my own business, I was servicing a home, and this customer asked me, and this was a very beautiful home that I was servicing, and this lady asked me, she said, Tim, do you guys do lawn care? And Nigel, I was it's very powerful in my position. I said, no, man, we do not. And she looked at me, Nigel, and she said, why not? And I was stunned by that question. And I had no answer for her. And I just said, well, I just kind of, I had to take two steps back, and
Yeah.
I left. I got in the truck. I left. It bothered me for days. And so I looked into it, and I found out that it really didn't require that much. We had people that could, with some training, could do it. It was just kind
Yeah.
of a bridge over a little bit.
Yeah.
So we made a little bit of an investment, and now today here we are. 13 years later, it's over 27% of the business I do
Right.
every year. You
Yeah.
know, and I'm always amazed at that question. Is why not?
Yeah. And
Right?
and and it's also, I mean, when I heard I was going to be, when I decided I was going to be speaking to you, yeah, my instant reaction around pest control is that it's a very reactive business. I've got a problem with this, you come and solve it, and then until I get another problem, I don't need to speak to you
Mm.
again. And that as a business model has its own problems, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you might have a customer that's absolutely delighted with you. They just don't have a need for you for another 2 or 3 years, right? But
What?
actually,
Yeah.
with the lawn
Yeah.
care, but actually with other parts of your programs that you offer, you do have recurring revenue
Sure.
streams.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Depending on the client, depending on the requirements, like in commercial businesses, they will need something on an ongoing basis,
Yeah, yeah,
reoccurring. Even too, when people experience a pest issue in a home, they do not want to go through that again. So they'll want to have something on a
right.
reoccurring
Yeah, a
basis.
preventative rather
Yeah,
than
you
remedial.
betcha.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. The other unique thing too is that what I found, and we will talk get back to the advertising thing, is that when a customer buys a service and they have one product line or service line, and they buy a secondary service line like pest control and then lawn care, that loyalty just goes right to the top. I mean, they're going to
yeah,
stay with you
yeah,
longer now because they have two services. They don't want to shop for another guy to do the lawn or
yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
is,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So again, regardless of pest control, if you were in any service business, the more service lines that a customer has with you, the more loyalty they're going to have. So that's another benefit of offering more than just one thing to a client. So
Yeah, yeah.
why not?
Um, well, listen, it's been really fascinating hearing about how you not only got into the business that you've been running so successfully, and how that's evolved over time, but also the book, which is not quite like anything else
Yeah,
I've read before. It starts with the title "Infested," right?
right.
Um, um, so I have given my audience, who are perhaps of a more sensitive disposition, a little bit of a disclaimer before this, but you've got to give us one of your absolute horror stories from the industry you've been in over this time.
Horror story. This is really. I think what's difficult is when you deal with people when insects invade a home and it gets to a point where it emotionally just destroys someone,
Yeah,
and puts someone into tears, and that they can't get any rest,
yeah, yeah,
and if it affects them, it affects their children.
yeah,
It's terrible, and especially if it affects low income areas where people
yeah,
don't have the funds,
yeah,
and Nigel, that happens all across the world, and it happens in all countries, So pest control is a vital thing, and one of the most amazing things. It's one of the most regulated industries on the
mm,
planet,
mm,
you know. But
yeah,
but we as an industry don't apply that much material or chemicals.
mm, mm, yeah,
But so what I would say, sir, is that the most devastating calls that I get, or the most horrifying thing, would be, and I'll share this. This is really a pretty rough story. Is that I had a gentleman one time that he had bed bugs in his home, and we did everything. I mean, we did everything correct, but he was still bed bugs were still happening. He was still
yeah,
being bitten. And what had happened was the bed bugs were living in the prosthetic leg that he was wearing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So
Oh my goodness.
that is how bad this can get in this industry. So it goes back to what I said earlier. It's a matter of inspection, research,
Yeah.
looking at everything potentially that can happen. So we did everything right in the home,
Yeah.
but these things were living and leaving with him.
Yeah.
So it's very,
I guess that's that's an interesting point to end on, going back to your bestiary, that, actually it must be one of the smallest things that you have to deal with, and it had the biggest impact.
yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
and actually, some of the really big, obvious problems that we have in life and business are not the most devastating. It's actually that accumulation of the tiny ones that can be really have the most impact.
Yeah, for sure. It again, it's where things are found and what people do and see and feel. When insects get from one place to the other, that bedroom environment,
Mm.
things change. When it gets
Yeah,
into the sanctity of your love
yeah,
nest,
yeah,
your bed,
yeah, 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 yeah,
things change, Nigel. It changes
yeah,
quickly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, on that note, it's been really interesting to spend some time with you today. I thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Glad to be with you today.
There's a few things from that conversation that I keep turning over. The first is what Tim calls the recession-proof, AI-resistant quality of work, like pest control. It sounds like a niche point until you sit with it. As I mentioned in the interview, Geoffrey Hinton told people looking for career stability to consider being plumbers. Tim would add pest controllers to that list. And when you think about what the work actually requires, it resists replacement in a way that most white-collar work simply doesn't. There's no digital substitute for someone who can look at a building and tell you where the problem is and why. That's a differentiation argument hiding in plain sight. The Pest bestiary, Tim's framework from the book mapping toxic employee types into actual pest species, is genuinely one of the most memorable management tools I've come across. Termites undermine the infrastructure quietly. Energy drainers, the bed bugs and fleas, leach the life out of the people around them. The analogy works because it's accurate. You'll think of specific colleagues. I'm not going to tell you which category I've occasionally inhabited myself. But the moment I found most striking was the why not story. A customer asked Tim 3 years into running the business whether he did lawn care, and he said no. And she said, why not? And Tim had no answer. He sat with that for days. And eventually he added lawn care to his portfolio. Today it accounts for over 27% of annual revenue. How many times have we reflexively said no to something out of habit, out of a desire to keep things tidy, out of a story we're telling ourselves about what our business is, without ever stopping to check whether the reason holds up? Tim's answer to why not turned into more than a quarter of his income. The question is worth asking more often. If you've made it this far, I hope the bedbug story hasn't followed you into your evening in quite the way it followed me. If you want to pick up Tim's book, and I recommend it, particularly if you're managing a small team and recognize some of the characters he describes, it's called Infested, End Workplace Drama, Stop Toxic Employees, Build a Thriving Small Business. I'll put the link in the show notes. If this podcast, Standing Apart, is useful to you, the single most valuable thing you can do is subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts, and tell one person about it. That's it. No algorithm required, no 5-star reviews needed, although very grateful if you fancy doing that. just a recommendation to someone who'd get something out of it. I'll be back in a fortnight. Until then, whatever you do, stand apart from the crowd. Standing Apart is a Sun Bear Consulting production.